The unexpected warning. The peaceful alien planet of Vortha had long been known for its advanced technology and calm society. It was a place where the people lived in harmony, freed from the struggles of war that plagued many other worlds. Vortha's leaders prided themselves on their peaceful ways and their ability to avoid conflict with the other civilizations in the galaxy. However, that calm was about to be shattered. It all began when the planet's defense system, known for its ability to detect even the slightest disturbances in space, picked up an unusual anomaly. The sensors detected a massive object hurtling toward the planet at an incredible speed. At first, the experts on Vortha thought it was just another meteor, a harmless rock drifting through space, but this was no ordinary space debris. As the object grew closer, the alarm bells rang throughout the planet's defense command. The object was too large to be a simple asteroid. The space agencies scrambled to identify it, but there were no matches in their databases. The shape was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The system couldn't identify its origin, nor could it make sense of its trajectory. It was on a collision course with Vortha. Vortha's leaders immediately began preparing for the worst. The planet had never faced an enemy of this scale before, and there was no way to tell if this was a natural event or the beginning of an attack. The defense network, designed to protect the planet from hostile ships, was quickly activated. Military ships were put on alert, ready to respond if needed. As the object grew larger in the sky, panic began to spread across Vortha. Citizens watched from their windows as the strange object became clearer. It was not just large. It was enormous, far bigger than any ship the Vorthans had ever encountered. What was it? Where had it come from? In the heart of the Vorthan capital, a group of scientists worked desperately to analyze the object's course. The analysis came back, and the results were staggering. The object was on a direct path toward their planet. They had no time to waste. The Vorthan government tried to reach out to other planets in the galaxy for help, but all communications were met with silence. There was no answer from the nearby systems, and the object showed no signs of slowing down. Then, just as the Vorthans were about to take drastic measures to defend their world, something incredible happened. A message began to broadcast on all channels. It was a strange language, one that no one on Vortha had ever heard before. It was incomprehensible, yet strangely clear. The transmission seemed to be coming from the object itself. The message was short, direct, and chilling. Human warship approaching. Prepare for chaos. For a moment, no one knew how to react. A human warship. Vortha had always been aware of humanity's existence, but they had never thought them capable of something like this. The Vorthans had long underestimated humans, considering them to be primitive and unworthy of notice. But this message proved them wrong. This was no ordinary ship. This was a warship, and it was heading straight for them. At that moment, Vortha's defenses went on high alert. The news spread like wildfire across the planet. Citizens rushed to shelters, and military leaders gathered to form a plan. The warship's message had left them with more questions than answers. Why had it come? What did it want? Was it a warning or a threat? The government issued an emergency broadcast, trying to calm the people, but the fear was already taking root. The entire planet was on edge. It was clear that the object approaching Vortha was unlike anything they had ever faced. The Vorthans tried to communicate with the ship, sending out messages in every language they knew, begging for information, for any sign of peace, but there was no response. The ship continued on its path, unwavering. In the midst of the confusion, a young Vorthan scientist named Terra stumbled across a shocking discovery. She had been working in a small lab when the news reached her. Her hands trembled as she dug through old records and data about human history. Her research revealed that humanity had always been a fiercely competitive and warlike species, with a reputation for conquering and expanding across galaxies. Could this be their long-awaited reckoning? Terra was not the only one who had begun to realize the truth. The Vorthan leaders, now fully aware that their peaceful existence was in jeopardy, gathered to discuss their next steps. The message had been clear. A human warship was approaching, and it meant business. Terra's mind raced. She had to get the word out. This wasn't just a random attack. This warship was part of a larger force. There was more to this than just a single ship. But how could she prove it before it was too late? As the massive warship closed in on the planet, the final question loomed. Would Vortha survive the chaos that was about to unfold? The first part of the story ends with this feeling of intense uncertainty. The human warship is out there, and it's coming for them. But no one knows exactly what will happen next. What did the message truly mean? Would the Vorthans be ready for what was coming? The hook is set, and the suspense builds as the mysterious human warship looms closer. The arrival of the human warship. As the days passed, the alien planet of Vortha waited in agonizing suspense. The strange, massive object was now unmistakably visible in their sky, growing ever larger. There was no denying it. Something was heading toward them, and the humans who had sent the chilling message had made their intentions clear. Terra, the young scientist, couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary attack. It was as if the warship was deliberately making its way toward Vortha, perhaps for a reason that no one could yet comprehend. The more she dug into the ancient records of human history, the more she feared what might be coming. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, chaos was beginning to unfold. The government had ordered the evacuation of major cities, and civilians were flooding into underground bunkers and shelters, unsure of how to defend themselves from this unprecedented threat. The military had mobilized, preparing to engage whatever force had arrived, but they were unsure if they could even make a dent in the looming warship that hovered overhead. They had no idea what kind of firepower it possessed. The government had also reached out to nearby planets, hoping to find allies who might help defend them against the humans. But the responses were slow, and many of the neighboring systems had been quiet, unable or unwilling to assist. Vortha, once considered the proud protector of peace, was now isolated, with its back against the wall. The military prepared its best ships to intercept the human warship. A fleet of sleek, powerful alien crafts was sent out, each armed with advanced energy weapons and shields designed to withstand the might of the most powerful invaders. Their mission was simple: prevent the warship from landing on their planet. The first encounter was brutal. As the alien fleet approached the human warship, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with dread. The ship was enormous, a gargantuan metal beast that seemed to consume the very stars around it. Its sleek exterior gleamed in the light of the distant sun, but its presence sent a shiver down the spine of every pilot in the alien fleet. They tried to engage. The alien ships fired their weapons first. Bright beams of energy shot toward the warship, hoping to weaken it, hoping for any sign of vulnerability. But to their shock, the beams barely made a dent. The human warship effortlessly dodged the attacks, its advanced shields absorbing the energy as if it was nothing. The alien fleet tried to regroup, but the human warship retaliated with terrifying precision. Massive energy cannons erupted from the ship, unleashing waves of destruction. The first alien ship disintegrated in a flash of light, leaving behind only debris and the screams of those lost in an instant. The alien fleet fired back in a frantic attempt to hold their ground, but one by one, their ships were torn apart. The humans weren't just powerful, they were ruthless, cutting through the alien forces like they were nothing more than paper. Within moments, the entire fleet was decimated, reduced to nothing but floating wreckage in space. On the ground, the people of Vortha watched in horror as the sky turned dark with the smoke of destroyed ships. The once proud planet's defense systems, which had always been able to deter any threat, now seemed helpless against this overwhelming force. It was a sobering realization. The humans were not here to negotiate or discuss peace. They were here to conquer. The warship broadcast another message, its tone cold and unyielding. Resistance is futile. Surrender, or we will continue our path of destruction. Terra's heart sank. She had seen this before. Stories of humanity's wars across the galaxy, of their relentless expansion and their unyielding thirst for power. But she had never imagined it would happen to her planet. The government now had no choice but to face the cold, hard truth. Vortha was at war, and the enemy was humanity. The alien leaders convened once again, but this time, there were no debates about strategy or defense. They all knew what was coming. The human warship was already inside their orbit, and the time for negotiation had passed. All they could do was brace themselves for the worst. Back in the warship, the captain, a fierce human leader, watched the destruction unfold. He had known this would be easy. The message had been clear from the start. Vortha had made a mistake by thinking that humanity could be ignored. The galaxy was now learning the price of underestimating humankind. As the warship continued its descent toward Vortha's surface, the captain issued another order, cold and calculating. Prepare the ground invasion. It's time to show them what happens when they stand in our way. The tension continued to rise as the human warship neared the planet, its shadow looming larger with every passing second. The fate of Vortha was now in the hands of the Vorthan people. Would they surrender, or would they face the full fury of humanity's might? As the countdown to the inevitable continued, the citizens of Vortha waited, uncertain of what their future would hold. They had never faced an enemy like this before, and they could only hope they would find a way to survive the coming chaos. The stage was set for a final confrontation, and the first battle was over. The warship had made its point, and the people of Vortha had been forced to realize the gravity of the situation. But what would come next? The answer would reveal itself in time. The first confrontation. The air on Vortha's surface felt thick with tension. The city streets were eerily quiet as the people awaited news from their military. The alien leaders had gathered in an emergency meeting, faces grim, knowing their world was on the brink of collapse. Vortha had never experienced anything like this before, an enemy so strong, so relentless. It seemed unstoppable. The human warship hovered in the skies above them, its presence overwhelming. It was like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. As each hour passed, the fear on the ground grew. What were the humans waiting for? Why hadn't they launched their ground invasion yet? Every second felt like an eternity. Terra, still haunted by the horrors of the battle in space, searched frantically for any answers in the history of humanity. She knew that the humans had once been a divided species, but something had changed. They had evolved into a single, unstoppable force. What had caused this transformation? How had they managed to gather such immense power? Her thoughts were interrupted when the emergency broadcast system blared to life. Cutting through the silence, the Vorthan president appeared on screen, his voice shaky but resolute. Vorthans, the time has come for us to make our stand. The human warship has shown no mercy, and our fleet has been destroyed. But we will not surrender. We will fight for our future. The speech did little to calm the nerves of the people, but it was a declaration of defiance. The Vorthans knew they had no choice but to face this enemy head-on, even if it meant certain destruction. Meanwhile, above the planet, the human warship was preparing for the next phase of its invasion. The captain stood at the helm, observing the destruction from the ship's command center. His expression was one of cold determination. He had no intention of letting Vortha slip through his grasp. His orders were clear: break their spirit, and take what was rightfully theirs. As the warship descended further into Vortha's atmosphere, the first wave of human troops began to disembark in small, heavily armed shuttles. They were led by skilled soldiers who had been bred for war, warriors who had lived through countless battles and had never lost. The ground forces were ready to secure the planet. Down below, the Vorthans prepared for their last stand. The military, though battered, had managed to gather a force of their own. They knew their weapons were no match for the human warship, but they had to try. They launched a counteroffensive, hoping to slow the invasion and give the people time to escape to the underground bunkers. The ground confrontation began with a series of blasts that shook the earth. The human soldiers, equipped with advanced armor and weapons, quickly overwhelmed the alien defenses. The Vorthans fought bravely, but they were outmatched at every turn. The humans were relentless, taking no prisoners, offering no mercy. Terra, caught in the chaos, watched as her people fought for their lives. Her heart ached as she saw the devastation unfold. The Vorthan soldiers fought with all their might, but they were losing ground with each passing minute. The human troops, under the command of a ruthless leader, were cutting through their lines like a knife through butter. One by one, Vorthan cities were falling. The human warship, which had once been a distant threat, was now an unstoppable force descending upon the planet's surface. As the hours wore on, it became clear that this was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The human warship's soldiers tore through the cities, and Vorthan resistance began to crumble. But even as their cities fell, the Vorthans refused to give up. They had fought for peace for so long, and they weren't about to let humanity destroy everything they had built. In a last-ditch effort, the Vorthan military deployed their most advanced weapon, a massive energy cannon, capable of taking out even the largest ships in a single shot. The weapon was a long shot, but it was all they had left. As the human warship approached the capital, the Vorthan military set the cannon into place. It fired, sending a massive beam of energy toward the warship. The blast hit its target, but the warship's shields absorbed the energy, leaving it untouched. The humans responded almost immediately. A barrage of missiles shot toward the cannon, tearing it apart before the Vorthans could even reload. The response was swift, precise, and devastating. Terra watched in disbelief as the final vestiges of Vorthan resistance crumbled. The warship had proven its power once again. It was clear now that there was no escape. No one would survive this. The humans had made their intentions clear. Vortha would be theirs. As the battle raged on, Terra had a sudden realization. The humans were not here to negotiate. They were not here to conquer in the traditional sense. They were here to destroy. They wanted to wipe Vortha off the map, to show the galaxy that no one, no matter how peaceful, was safe from the wrath of humanity. And yet, despite the overwhelming force, despite the bloodshed, something inside Terra refused to give up. She couldn't help but believe that the humans had made a mistake. They had underestimated the will of the Vorthan people. Perhaps there was still a way to turn the tide. Maybe, just maybe, the Vorthans could find a way to survive. But for now, the first confrontation had ended. The human warship had shown its strength, and the battle for Vortha was far from over. The struggle for survival. The heart of Vortha was in flames. The once beautiful cities lay in ruins, their towering spires reduced to rubble. The streets, once filled with the laughter and chatter of citizens, were now eerily silent. The warship loomed above, a dark shadow stretching across the planet, casting a long, menacing pall over the surviving people. Vortha's government had been fractured in the wake of the attack. The surviving leaders, scattered and fearful, gathered in the underground bunkers, trying to organize what was left of their military. Their forces had been decimated, and their cities burned. The human warship had proved itself to be unstoppable. For every attempt at resistance, there had been an overwhelming response. Destruction was all around them, and hope was slipping away. Terra, having survived the chaos, found herself among the few who had managed to escape into the bunkers. She sat in a small, dimly lit room, her mind racing. Her people had fought valiantly, but the humans were simply too powerful. She had seen firsthand the destructive force the humans possessed. It was like nothing Vortha had ever known. But she refused to give up. There had to be something they could do. As a scientist, she understood the science behind their enemy's technology, and she knew that if they could get their hands on the right information, they might stand a chance. The problem was time. The human forces were already pushing deeper into their territory, destroying everything in their path. They had to act quickly. In the midst of the chaos, an unexpected message came through. It wasn't from the human warship, but from one of the neighboring planets. A lone voice from the Eric system, a once allied planet that Vortha had shared resources with, was offering aid. The message was clear. "We've been monitoring the situation. We can send reinforcements, but we need you to buy us time. If you can disrupt their communications, we can assist you, but you must act now." Tara's heart skipped a beat. Reinforcements. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had left. She immediately gathered a small team of Vorthan engineers and soldiers. They would need to infiltrate one of the human communications arrays, an outpost deep within the territory now under human control. If they could sabotage the communications, they might delay the invasion long enough for the Irix forces to arrive. The team set off under the cover of night. They moved quickly and quietly, knowing that even the smallest mistake could cost them everything. Their destination was a communications hub located within the outskirts of the capital, one of the few remaining strongholds that the humans hadn't yet captured. As they neared the hub, Tara couldn't help but wonder if they were making a mistake. The human soldiers were everywhere, their presence dominating the landscape. The warship continued to hover above them, watching over their every move. It was almost as if the ship could sense their every step. But there was no turning back. The mission was their last hope. They reached the communications array under the cover of darkness, but just as they were about to infiltrate, an alarm went off. The humans had detected them. The team scrambled into action, setting up explosives around the perimeter to disrupt the array's power source. The human soldiers were closing in fast, their weapons raised, ready to attack. Tara's heart raced as she worked quickly, making sure everything was in place. Then, with a deafening boom, the explosives went off. The communications array erupted in a fiery explosion, sending shockwaves through the air. The enemy soldiers were thrown back, caught off guard by the blast. Tara and her team took advantage of the chaos, pushing forward with everything they had. They fought their way through the enemy soldiers, using the element of surprise to their advantage. Each step felt like a lifetime, but they kept going, driven by the hope that they could buy their planet a little more time. The mission was a success. The communications array was destroyed, and the human forces had been temporarily cut off from their command. But Tara knew that this was only a temporary victory. The human warship was still above them, its powers seemingly unmatched, and the ground forces were sure to retaliate soon. As Tara and her team made their way back to the bunkers, she couldn't help but wonder if this small victory would be enough. The destruction they had caused had given them a brief moment of respite, but the battle was far from over. The true test of their survival was yet to come. Back in the bunker, Tara relayed the news of their success to the surviving leaders. The delay in communications had bought them some time, but the humans were already planning their next move. It was clear now. Vortha was not just fighting for its survival, it was fighting for its very existence. With the human forces closing in, Tara couldn't shake the feeling that the next battle would be the one that would decide their fate. Would they stand a chance, or would the might of humanity be too much to overcome? "You said." The secret revealed. As the days passed, the hope sparked by Tara's team's successful sabotage of the human communications array began to dwindle. Though the humans were temporarily stalled, their superior numbers and technology meant it would only be a matter of time before they regrouped and attacked once more. The Vorthan leadership had no illusions anymore. They were on the verge of extinction, their defenses crippled, their cities in ruins. Yet, as Vortha's survivors huddled in their underground bunkers, a new piece of information came to light, a discovery that would change everything. Tara had been researching the human warship and its crew, determined to find any weakness, any opening that might give the Vorthans a chance. She had spent countless hours scanning old data archives, reading about humanity's rise to power. It was during this research that she stumbled upon something unexpected. Ancient documents, hidden away in the deepest corners of Vortha's archives, told a story that had long been buried. It was a story of humanity's past, a time when they were weak, divided, and fragmented. In those early days, the humans had been like the Vorthans once were, peaceful, unsure of themselves, and hesitant to engage in war. But something had changed. The documents detailed the human discovery of an ancient, highly advanced technology that had radically altered their society. Terra dug deeper into the records, reading more about how this technology, when discovered, transformed humanity into an unstoppable force. What they had found wasn't just advanced weapons, but a power that allowed them to unite. An ancient relic, long buried on Earth, had given them the ability to conquer. The technology provided the humans with a means to merge their consciousness, to link their minds as one. The result: an unmatched unity and a singular purpose, a collective will that made them stronger than any single individual. This was no ordinary empire. This was a species bound together not by politics or territory, but by a shared mind, an unstoppable hive-like consciousness. The humans were no longer just a species. They had become a singular, unified force, operating as one mind, one will. Terra's heart sank as she pieced together the implications of this discovery. Humanity wasn't just powerful in terms of military might. Their strength was in their unity. Vortha had underestimated the humans' ability to strategize and act in perfect coordination. Their warship, their soldiers, their fleets, they were all a part of a greater whole, a singular entity, and the implications of this were terrifying. She immediately shared her findings with the Vorthan leadership, hoping that somehow this new knowledge would help them devise a counter-strategy. The leaders were shaken. They had never imagined that humanity's rise to power was not just due to technology, but to an almost supernatural unity, a force that made them invincible. With the enemy's strength fully realized, the Vorthans scrambled to adapt. They began working in secret to develop new weapons, to use the alien technology they had left to try and level the playing field. But there was one question that haunted Terra. Was there any hope left? Could the Vorthans truly survive against an enemy whose very existence had been engineered for conquest? The answer came sooner than she had expected. Just as Vortha's new plans began to take shape, the first human wave reached the capital. The warship hovered above, an imposing, almost divine figure in the sky, while ground troops advanced, their weapons ready. The Vorthan military scrambled to meet the threat, but as they prepared to launch their counteroffensive, something happened that neither side had anticipated. A new fleet, much larger and more advanced than any Vorthan forces had ever seen, appeared out of nowhere. It was not the Vorthans' fleet. It was the Irix systems reinforcements, just as they had promised. The fleet, long in hiding and waiting for the right moment, had arrived at last. But what made it even more surprising was the fact that the Irix fleet was not made up of a single species. They were a coalition of alien races, all united under one banner. An alliance born of necessity and survival, formed after the first signs of humanity's expansion reached their ears. Terra's breath caught in her throat as she realized the implications of this. It wasn't just the Vorthans who had been targeted by humanity's conquest. The entire galaxy had been living in fear of human expansion for years, and now, at last, they had found their chance to unite. The fight was no longer just about Vortha. It was about the survival of countless worlds. The new fleet, led by the Irix systems commanders, had come to their aid, and with their help, the Vorthans were given a fighting chance. The battle had now become a war that would shape the future of the galaxy itself. The Vorthan forces, with the backing of their new allies, had one final chance to strike back. They knew that the coming days would decide everything. Would they survive the overwhelming might of the human war machine? Or would humanity, with its hive-like consciousness and unstoppable unity, crush them all? As the countdown to the final battle began, Terra knew that the secret was out. The Vorthans had learned the true nature of their enemy, but would it be enough to turn the tide? The fate of Vortha and the galaxy rested on the edge of a blade, and the coming days would decide whether survival was even possible. The struggle was far from over, and it was no longer just a fight for Vortha. It was a fight for the future of every world in the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. The final countdown. The war had escalated beyond Vortha's wildest fears. With the arrival of the Irix fleet and the newly formed Galactic Alliance, The battle for Vortha had now transformed into a full-scale war. The once peaceful planet was no longer just fighting for its survival. It was fighting for the survival of every world in the galaxy. Terra stood in the underground command center, her face illuminated by the flickering lights of the holographic map. The Vorthan leaders, along with their new allies from the Irix system, were gathered around her, discussing their next move. The human warship was still in orbit, its intimidating presence hovering above them. But now, they had a chance to push back. The Alliance had worked quickly to prepare their forces. The Irix fleet was massive, and with their combined might, they believed they could challenge the human forces. But time was running out. The human warship had already destroyed nearly half of their military, and its captain had made it clear in a broadcast that there would be no further negotiations. Humanity would not stop until Vortha was either under their control or completely eradicated. "We have one chance," Terra's voice echoed in the command room. "If we don't act quickly, we'll lose everything. We need to disrupt their warship systems, and we need to do it now." The Alliance had come up with a risky plan. They would launch a coordinated strike on the human warship, using a combination of advanced weapons and stealth technology. The goal was to disable the warship's shields and weapons long enough for their forces to make a final push. It was the only chance they had. The plan was simple. They would send a small team to infiltrate the warship's lower levels, disable the power systems, and create a weakness. The Irix fleet would then launch a diversionary attack, drawing the human forces away from the warship long enough to allow the Vorthan forces to strike. It was dangerous, and it had never been attempted before, but it was their best hope. Terra, still haunted by the destruction she had witnessed, knew the stakes. The plan would either succeed in saving the galaxy or be their undoing. She had volunteered to be a part of the infiltration team, despite the risks. If they could weaken the warship, even for a brief moment, it would give them the upper hand. As the Alliance's ships prepared for battle, Terra and her team suited up, ready to board one of the Irix stealth shuttles. The shuttle would carry them close to the warship, and from there, they would have to navigate its heavily guarded hull, find the power core, and disable it. The mission was incredibly risky, and success seemed far from guaranteed. On the ground, the Vorthan forces were making final preparations. Their forces, though diminished, were still strong enough to provide a fighting chance. They had been trained for moments like this. Their bravery was their greatest strength. It would be their resolve that determined the outcome of this battle. As the clock ticked down, Terra couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The fate of her people, the fate of the galaxy, rested on this mission. And the clock was ticking. Above them, the human warship prepared for its final push. It had become clear to the humans that they were not going to conquer Vortha without a fight, and they had no intention of backing down. The captain of the warship, a calculated and ruthless leader, issued a final order. "Prepare for ground assault. We'll wipe them out, once and for all. No mercy." The Vorthans, along with their allies, braced themselves for the coming battle. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. The final assault would determine the fate of Vortha, and the fate of every planet in the galaxy that humanity had its sights set on. The battle was about to begin, and Terra had one last chance to make a difference. She knew that this would be the moment that would either break them or save them. The fate of her people, the future of the galaxy, depended on their success. As the fleet of Alliance ships lifted off from the surface, heading toward the warship, Terra's thoughts were clear. This was their final stand. They had no more chances after this. Whatever happened next, they had to give it everything they had. And then the battle began. The Alliance ships launched in a coordinated assault, engaging the human forces in space. Explosions rocked the heavens as the Irix fleet took the fight to the human ships. For a moment, the warship was distracted, its focus shifting toward the fierce battle in the skies above Vortha. This was the moment. The Vorthan team, led by Terra, boarded their shuttle and raced toward the warship's belly. It was now or never. The final countdown was here. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Would they succeed? Would they find a way to stop the human warship? The battle for survival had reached its most critical point, the unseen twist. The chaos of battle raged all around them. Above Vortha, the sky had become a war zone. Explosions lit up the heavens as the Eric's fleet and the human warships exchanged devastating fire. The massive human warship, though damaged, had begun its ground assault on the planet's surface. Its soldiers were pouring out, relentless in their determination to conquer the once proud planet. The very ground beneath Vortha shook with every blow. But deep within the belly of the beast, the human warship, Terra's team moved quickly, moving in silence. Their shuttle had dropped them off on the warship's lower levels, and they had successfully infiltrated the ship's hull. The structure was dark and foreboding, its metal walls humming with the sound of power running through its systems. The team's objective was clear. They needed to reach the power core and disable the ship's systems, creating a window of opportunity for the Alliance's forces. Terra's heart pounded as they moved through the corridors, her eyes scanning every corner for potential threats. The human soldiers were scattered, engaged in the fierce battle above. This was their chance, but the further they ventured into the warship, the more they realized that something was wrong. The ship seemed empty. The eerie silence that surrounded them felt unnatural. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the warship itself was holding its breath. There was no sign of the enemy, no patrols, no movement. It was almost as if they were being drawn into a trap. Terra signaled for the team to halt. She'd noticed something strange on the ship's control panel, a series of encrypted messages, ones she hadn't seen before. As she hacked into the system to decipher them, a realization hit her like a thunderclap. This warship wasn't just a military vessel. It was a symbol of something much larger, a part of a much more terrifying plan. The humans, she realized, were not only trying to conquer Vortha. They had set their sights on the entire galaxy. And they weren't coming to destroy. They were coming to unite. Terra quickly accessed a series of classified files, their contents chilling her to the core. The human captain was not just a leader of a warship. He was the head of a galaxy-wide initiative, a project that had been in motion for decades. The humans had been preparing to assimilate other planets, not by force, but by unity. They were building a collective consciousness, one planet at a time, until the entire galaxy would be part of a single mind. The warship's power core was not just an energy source. It was a device designed to alter the very fabric of reality. It was capable of linking every sentient species into a unified collective, making them part of humanity's mind. Those who resisted would be destroyed, but those who accepted would be assimilated into a new singular purpose. A horrifying thought crossed Terra's mind. Humanity had already perfected this technology on their own people. What if, when the warship landed, it wasn't just about taking control of Vortha? What if they planned to turn everyone, alien and human alike, into part of their collective? With time running out, Terra turned to her team, her voice urgent. We need to stop the power core. Not just disable it. We need to destroy it completely. If we don't, they'll be able to link the entire galaxy into their collective. This war, this isn't about conquering us. It's about merging us. Her team understood immediately, but there was no time for second-guessing. They had come too far to turn back. With a clear target now in sight, they'd made their way to the heart of the warship, determined to prevent this nightmare from becoming a reality. Meanwhile, back on the surface of Vortha, the tide of battle was shifting. The Alliance forces were holding their ground, but humanity's war machine was relentless. The human warship's massive guns had begun to fire, tearing apart the Vorthan defenses, while the human soldiers on the ground advanced. It was a desperate fight, and the outcome was uncertain. But even as the battle seemed to tip in humanity's favor, a massive explosion rang out from the skies above. The human warship trembled as a shockwave passed through its hull, and for the first time, its systems flickered and sparked. Terra and her team had made it to the core. The power source was immense, glowing with an unnatural light. But something was wrong. It was still active. They needed to act quickly. Terra directed her team to plant explosives around the core, knowing they had one shot to destroy it before it was too late. But just as they set the final charge, the ship shuddered again, and a new voice echoed throughout the warship's intercom system. "This is Captain Alaric." The voice called out, smooth and calm, though there was an underlying tone of danger. "I see you've made it this far. But it's too late. Your resistance is futile. You've already begun the process of assimilation. It's only a matter of time before your minds are part of the collective." The message sent a chill down Terra's spine. Captain Alaric had been aware of their every move. The ship's systems had been watching them. Every step had been anticipated. And yet they were still fighting. For what? They weren't sure anymore. The explosion rang out, and the core was destroyed in a blinding flash of light. The warship's systems began to fail, its power flickering, as the collective consciousness was severed. The plan had been thwarted. But even as the warship began to burn and break apart in space, Captain Alaric's final words echoed in Terra's mind. "The collective is inevitable. No matter what you do, humanity will unite the galaxy." With the warship falling into chaos, the Irix fleet and the Vorthan forces launched their final assault. The humans had suffered a crippling blow, but there was no doubt that the war was far from over. Humanity's plan had been halted, but the message had been clear. Humanity's collective mind would rise again. The battle was won, but the war had only just begun.